You can't just sit here forever, kid, the waitress murmured, her tone clipped but not unkind. The boy didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the silver coins scattered before him. 5 dull quarters and a single dime. 55 cents, heavy as shame in his palm. The clock above the counter ticked, each second a reminder that hunger had its own voice, and it roared inside him. His stomach cramped hard enough to make him bend forward, clutching his side. 2 days, 2 entire days since anything solid had passed his lips, and now even water felt like a luxury. He had walked 5 miles in the cold November wind to reach this diner, an old roadside spot whose flickering neon sign read, Dottie's Home Grill. The smell of frying bacon and melted butter hit him like a memory of comfort he could no longer afford. The waitress, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes and a hairnet that had seen better days, finally sighed. She poured him a glass of tap water and pushed it toward him. "Here," she said quietly. "It's on the house." He nodded once, a small, restrained gesture, and sipped it slowly, as if it were precious. Behind him, laughter rippled from another booth, a group of truckers swapping stories about easy money and long nights. The boy didn't turn. He had no strength for envy. He simply waited, counting the seconds between pangs of hunger and the courage he needed to spend what little he had. When he finally spoke, it was barely a whisper. 1 plate of eggs, no sides. The waitress hesitated. She glanced at his coins again, then at his face, dark skin, hollow cheeks, eyes far older than his years. "You sure, sweetheart? That's not much food." He nodded. "It's enough." She walked away slowly, muttering something under her breath about the world being crueler than it had any right to be. Across the diner, an elderly couple sat near the window. The man's hands trembled as he tried to count the bills in his wallet, his wife's eyes darting toward the register. Their clothes were neat but worn, their dignity stretched thin. The woman whispered something, a plea, a prayer maybe, and the man shook his head, defeated. The boy watched them, silent. He wasn't sure why. Maybe because he saw something of himself in their quiet desperation. That same helplessness that burned but didn't show. When his plate arrived, 2 eggs, barely warm, sliding across a chipped ceramic dish, the scent hit him so hard he nearly closed his eyes in gratitude. Steam rose, and for a fleeting second, the world felt kind. Then he heard it, the soft sound of the old woman's voice breaking as she apologized to the waitress. "I'm so sorry, dear. We thought the Social Security check would clear this morning. We'll come back tomorrow to pay. I promise you." The waitress frowned, uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I can't let you leave without paying. It's not up to me. My boss." The old man lowered his head. "We understand." His voice carried the weight of surrender. "It's been a rough month." The boy stared at his food, then at them. A silence stretched across the room. A silence that had shape and texture, heavy as stone. Then, slowly, he stood. He picked up his plate. The waitress turned. "Honey, what are you—" He didn't answer. He crossed the floor quietly, each step deliberate. The truckers stopped laughing. Even the kitchen fell still. When he reached the elderly couple's table, the old woman looked up, startled. "You can have mine," he said simply. Her eyes widened. "Oh, no, no, dear, you don't have to." He smiled, faint but sincere. "I'll eat later." And before she could speak again, he placed the plate in front of her and stepped back. The old man's eyes filled with tears. The boy turned away before they could thank him. He didn't want thanks. He wanted silence, the kind that came when you did something that hurt and healed at the same time. He walked out into the cold. The diner door shut behind him with a small, final chime. What he didn't see was the phone behind the counter, recording. The owner, a heavy-set man with a grizzled beard, had been filming quietly since the moment the boy stood up. Something in that gesture, that wordless generosity, had moved him in a way he couldn't explain. Outside, the air bit through the boy's thin jacket. The street was nearly empty, just the hum of a distant engine and the hiss of wind scraping against the pavement. He pulled his hood tight and kept walking. He didn't have a home to return to, just a cot in the back room of a church shelter where the smell of mildew mixed with old prayers. He lay down that night listening to his stomach twist and turn. The hunger felt different now, Not cruel, but patient. He told himself that tomorrow would be better, even though he had no reason to believe it. What he didn't know was that, even as he drifted toward uneasy sleep, millions of screens were lighting up with his face. The diner's owner had posted the video online with a caption that read, "A hungry kid gives away his only meal. Humanity still exists." By dawn, it had been shared over 200,000 times. Across the city, in a high-rise penthouse with glass walls overlooking the skyline, a billionaire named Samuel Drayton watched the clip on his phone while sipping his morning coffee. He was not a man easily moved. His life had been built on numbers, mergers, and markets. But something about the boy, that small, quiet dignity, pierced through the armor he'd built around himself. He replayed the moment again. The way the boy smiled before walking away, the deliberate grace of his gesture. It wasn't performance. It was pure instinct. The kind of kindness that came from the bone. He called his assistant. "Find out who that boy is." There was no hesitation in his voice. By mid-morning, the internet had already done half the work. People had tracked down the diner, interviewed the waitress, identified the shelter. Hashtags bloomed across social media. The boy who gave everything. Back at the church, the boy woke to the rumble of an engine outside, a deep, expensive sound that didn't belong in this neighborhood. He rubbed his eyes and sat up. Through the cracked window, he saw a sleek black sedan parked by the curb. The back door opened, and a man in a dark overcoat stepped out, holding a small wooden box and an envelope. The boy blinked, unsure if he was dreaming. The man looked around, then spotted him by the door. Their eyes met, one filled with confusion, the other with quiet purpose. "Are you Malik?" the man asked. The boy nodded slowly. "Then I think this belongs to you." He handed over the box. Inside, nestled in velvet lining, lay a brand new laptop, sleek, silver, untouched. Beneath it, a letter stamped with a crest that shimmered in the light. The billionaire watched as Malik lifted it carefully. His hands trembled. He unfolded the letter, reading the words silently. A scholarship, a full one, and a note at the bottom. "Kindness never goes unnoticed. You gave your last meal. Now, let us give you a future." The billionaire smiled softly. "The world saw what you did," he said, "and the world remembered." Malik couldn't speak, his throat locked, his chest tight. All he could do was nod, clutching the letter like it might vanish. In that moment, the cold didn't matter. The hunger didn't matter. Only the warmth that bloomed in his chest, the kind that couldn't be bought, only earned. Because sometimes, the smallest act in the quietest corner of the world was enough to change everything. And this, though Malik didn't yet know it, was only the beginning. The letter trembled in Malik's hands long after the car had gone. The billionaire's sedan vanished down the street, leaving behind the scent of luxury, something like cedar and cold air. For a while, he simply stood there, staring at the folded paper as if it were too heavy to hold. He had never owned anything so valuable. Not a toy, not a pair of shoes, not even a book with his name in it. Everything he'd ever had came secondhand, marked by someone else's story. This was new, untouched, his. The shelter supervisor, Reverend Hill, found him standing in the doorway, eyes glassy. The old man's voice carried both gravel and grace. "Boy, you all right?" Malik nodded, but the Reverend saw through the lie. When he took the letter from Malik's trembling fingers and read it, his own hands began to shake. "A scholarship," he whispered. "Lord have mercy. Full tuition, housing, and stipend." His eyes widened as he kept reading. "And a personal endowment. $5,000 to start." For Malik, the numbers didn't even feel real. Money had always existed like air, invisible, everywhere for others, scarce for him. By noon, word had spread through the shelter. The boy who had given away his meal had been found by a billionaire. The residents clapped his back, some in awe, others in quiet envy. Malik just smiled weakly. He didn't know how to accept praise. The Reverend insisted on taking him downtown to a local news station for an interview. "It'll help you, son," he said. "Might even help the shelter. People need stories like yours." But Malik hesitated. He didn't like attention. It felt strange, dangerous. Because deep inside, beneath the humility, beneath the ache of hunger and gratitude, he carried something else. Something he had never told anyone. It was the reason he never looked anyone straight in the eye for too long. The reason he avoided hospitals, cameras, and anything that required his full name. He wasn't supposed to exist, not legally, not on paper. He had been born in a forgotten town to a mother who fled before signing his birth certificate. She'd disappeared when he was 6, leaving him with a stack of unpaid bills and a memory that felt more like a fever dream than love. The system had swallowed him up. Foster homes, group homes, shelters, until he learned to live beneath notice. No social security number, no ID. Just a name he'd given himself, Malik. And now, a billionaire had written that name on a scholarship letter. The cruel irony wasn't lost on him. How do you cash a miracle when the world doesn't even know you exist? He didn't tell the Reverend, not yet. Instead, he folded the letter carefully and tucked it into his jacket pocket. He said he needed some air, and before the Reverend could argue, he slipped out into the city streets. The cold wind whipped through the alleys, but Malik didn't mind. He was used to cold, physical, emotional, all of it. What scared him wasn't the weather. It was the idea that someone had finally noticed him. He wandered until the sun dipped behind the buildings, painting the sky in bruised gold. The city buzzed with evening life, taxis honking, street vendors shouting, laughter spilling from bars. But he felt detached from it all, like he was watching from behind glass. He stopped at a bridge overlooking the frozen river. The lights shimmered on the surface like stars trapped beneath the ice. He leaned against the railing and took out the letter again, tracing his finger over the billionaire's signature, Samuel Drayton. The name sounded powerful, like something out of a storybook. Malik wondered what made a man like that notice a boy like him. He wondered what kindness looked like when you had everything. Then he remembered the diner, the warmth of the eggs, the faces of the elderly couple, the way the old woman's hands had trembled when she reached for the plate. That was why he'd done it, not for attention, not for anything in return, just to stop someone else from feeling what he felt every day, invisible. Behind him, footsteps crunched on the pavement. He turned, startled. It was the diner's owner, the man who'd filmed the video. He carried a paper bag and looked both nervous and proud. "Hey, kid," he said. "Been looking for you." Malik stiffened, instinctively wary. The man raised a hand. "Easy, I ain't here to bother you. Just wanted to say thanks. You didn't just help that couple, you helped me remember what decency looks like. I posted that video because people need to see it. And now, well, looks like the world saw." He handed Malik the bag. "Hot meal, on the house." Malik blinked, unsure how to respond. His throat tightened. "Thank you," he managed. The man smiled. "Nah, thank you." Then, softer. "Don't disappear again, all right? Folks are looking for you." When he left, Malik opened the bag. Inside was a sandwich, thick, still warm, and a note written on the napkin. "You deserve better days." He sat on the bridge railing, eating slowly, eyes on the water. The taste hit him hard, not just the flavor, but what it meant. Being seen, being fed, being remembered. But beneath the warmth of gratitude, a knot of fear tightened. If the world knew his name, it wouldn't take long before someone noticed the missing pieces. The paperwork, the records that didn't exist. And when they did, everything could vanish as quickly as it appeared. That night, Malik returned to the shelter long after curfew. Reverend Hill sat waiting in the dim hallway, arms crossed but eyes gentle. "Where have you been?" "Walking," Malik said. The Reverend sighed. "You're famous now, son. That video's everywhere. Even the mayor's office called today. You realize what that means?" Malik shook his head. "It means people are paying attention. But fame's a funny thing. It can lift you up or crush you, depending on what you do next." Malik didn't answer. The Reverend studied him for a long moment before speaking again, softer now. "You got a good heart, boy. Don't let this world twist it. Promise me that." "I promise," Malik whispered. The Reverend nodded and patted his shoulder. "Good. Now get some sleep. Big day tomorrow." Malik climbed into bed, staring at the cracked ceiling. Sleep didn't come easily. The city outside hummed like a restless machine, and every car passing by made his heart beat faster, as if the world was already closing in. He didn't know that, miles away, Samuel Drayton was lying awake too, watching the same video again, pausing on the moment Malik pushed the plate across the table. There was something haunting in the boy's eyes. Not just hunger, not just kindness. Something else. Something he recognized. Drayton picked up his phone and called his private investigator. "I need everything on that boy," he said. "Every record, every detail." There was a pause on the line. "Sir, there's nothing to find. No birth certificate, no ID, no school records. It's like he doesn't exist." Drayton's brow furrowed. "Everyone exists. Keep looking." But deep down, he already knew. The world had failed someone it was never meant to forget. And that realization would soon turn a viral act of kindness into something far greater. A reckoning. By morning, the city had turned Malik's name into a headline. The hungry hero. The boy who gave his last meal. Every news outlet, every blog, every social feed carried his face. That quiet, hesitant smile, frozen mid-gesture as he handed over the plate. At first, it seemed beautiful. People donated to the shelter. Volunteers arrived with boxes of food, clothes, even money. The Reverend called it a blessing. But Malik felt the change before anyone else noticed it. The way strangers' eyes lingered too long, how they whispered when he passed. Fame, he realized, wasn't admiration. It was ownership. They thought they knew him because they'd seen a clip, 20 seconds of charity. And now they spoke about him as if he were a character in their story, not a person living inside his own. By the third day, reporters camped outside the shelter gates. They waited with microphones and cameras, shouting questions that blurred together. "Malik, what did it feel like to give away your last meal? Do you think you've inspired a movement? Are you in touch with the billionaire yet?" He said nothing. Every word he gave away became a headline, twisted and reused. The Reverend tried to shield him, but the attention kept growing. The city's mayor tweeted about an inspiring act of compassion, while influencers recorded reaction videos about kindness and faith. Then came the doubt. A radio host asked, "If this boy's so poor, how come no one knew about him before? You'd think someone that generous would have a record somewhere." Within hours, online comments shifted. "Seems fishy?" "Fake sob story." "No ID, no school, no past." "Maybe he's lying." The very thing Malik feared had found him. His invisibility, once his protection, became his crime. That evening, as the sun bled out behind the skyline, the shelter door burst open. 2 city officials stood in the doorway, accompanied by a social services agent. Their expressions were polite, professional, cold. "Malik," the woman said, clipboard in hand. "We're conducting an identity verification process. Can you provide documentation, birth certificate, social security number, anything?" He froze. Reverend Hill stepped forward. "He's just a boy, for heaven's sake. He's done nothing wrong." The woman adjusted her glasses. "Sir, we simply need to confirm his eligibility for the scholarship he's been offered. Without documentation, he cannot legally accept it." The words sliced through the air. Cannot legally accept it. It didn't matter that he'd done the right thing. The law only recognized what could be printed, filed, stamped, and certified. Malik stammered, "I don't have any papers. My mom, she left. I don't know where she went." The officials exchanged a look that wasn't pity, but calculation. "Then you're considered undocumented," she said flatly. "Until we can establish identity, you can't stay here indefinitely." Reverend Hill's voice rose. "He's got nowhere else to go." "I'm sorry, Reverend. Rules are rules." They left behind a letter, official, impersonal, giving Malik 72 hours to appear for questioning at the social services office. When the door shut, silence filled the hallway. The Reverend sank into a chair, face buried in his hands. "This world, it eats its angels," he muttered. Malik sat still, numb. That night, he packed his small bag, a torn backpack with nothing but a spare shirt, the laptop, and the scholarship letter. He couldn't risk being found, not by people who saw him as a case number. He left a note on the Reverend's desk. "Thank you for everything. Please don't worry, I'll be okay." He wasn't. By dawn, the story had twisted further. A tabloid ran a headline that read, "Viral Hero or Fraud." Questions rise about the boy with no past. Comment sections flooded with venom disguised as curiosity. If he's undocumented, why give him money? Another scam to get sympathy. Bet the billionaire's regretting it now. The same world that had praised him now dissected him. Meanwhile, in the glass tower above the city, Samuel Drayton sat at his desk, phone buzzing with alerts. His publicist urged him to issue a statement, distance himself from potential controversy. But Drayton said nothing. He stared at Malik's photo, that fragile, defiant face, and felt something stir that was half guilt, half fury. He remembered his own childhood, buried deep under years of wealth and forgetting. A small apartment, a sick mother, the constant ache of hunger. He'd escaped it, buried it, replaced it with numbers and buildings and power. And now, here was this boy, a mirror of what he used to be, punished for an act of grace. "Find him," Drayton said, quietly, before they do. The investigator hesitated. "Sir, the city's already searching for him. It won't be easy." Drayton's gaze hardened. "Then make it easy." Across the river, Malik moved like a ghost through the streets. He avoided cameras, cut through alleys, slept behind dumpsters or in train stations. Every time he saw a screen with his face on it, he turned away. The laptop stayed wrapped in a towel in his bag. The scholarship letter, creased and worn, was his only comfort. He read it every night before sleep, as if the words could build him a place in the world that wouldn't vanish come morning. But hunger returned, slow and familiar. His body ached and the old dizziness crept in. He knew the signs, the faint hum in his ears, the pressure behind his eyes. He'd learned the science of starvation from experience. When the body runs out of glycogen, it starts burning fat, then muscle, then hope. On the fourth night, he collapsed near a train station, his vision tunneling into white. Someone shouted, then darkness swallowed him. He woke in a small clinic, sterile walls, humming machines. A nurse leaned over him. "You're safe," she said softly. "You passed out. Low blood sugar, dehydration." Malik blinked, confused. "How did I—" The nurse smiled faintly. "Someone found you and brought you here, said his name was Drayton." For a moment he thought he'd misheard, but when he turned his head, Samuel Drayton was standing by the door, dressed plainly, no entourage, no cameras. Just a man who looked tired of watching the world from above. Malik tried to sit up, but the billionaire raised a hand. "Don't. You need rest." Why'd you help me again?" Malik asked weakly. Drayton looked at him for a long time before answering. "Because the world doesn't get to decide who's real." The words hung in the air, heavy with truth. For the first time, Malik saw not a billionaire, but another human being, someone who understood what it meant to be hungry, not just for food, but for acknowledgement. Drayton pulled a chair closer and sat. "You've got two choices," he said. "We can fight this, get lawyers, challenge the system. Or you can disappear again, and all this kindness, all this noise will fade like it never happened." Malik stared at his hands. "If I fight, they'll find out everything." "They already have," Drayton said quietly. "And that's exactly why you have to fight." For a long time, neither spoke. The only sound was the faint rhythm of the heart monitor, steady and fragile, like the beat of defiance itself. Outside, the city glowed, unaware that inside that small clinic room, a boy without a name and a man who'd built an empire were about to challenge the same injustice that bound them both. The morning air outside the clinic was heavy with static, the kind of stillness that came before a storm of attention. Malik felt it before he saw it. When he stepped out, a dozen cameras flared like gunfire. Microphones rose from every angle, voices overlapping, each one calling his name as if they owned it. "Malik, Malik, do you have anything to say to the public? Are you really undocumented? Did the billionaire fabricate the scholarship?" He froze, blinded by flashes, heart pounding so hard it shook his ribs. Drayton moved quickly, placing a hand on his shoulder and steering him through the crowd. "Keep your head down," he muttered. "Don't answer." The car door slammed behind them, cutting off the noise, but not the feeling. The echo of it lingered in Malik's bones, that greedy hunger for a reaction. He'd seen that look before, not curiosity, but consumption. As the car rolled through the city, screens glowed from every shop window, his own face replayed endlessly, now accompanied by headlines dripping with suspicion. "The kindness hoax? Philanthropist protege under investigation." Drayton's jaw tightened. "They don't want truth. They want a spectacle." Malik whispered. They hate me. They don't even know you, Drayton said. That's the danger. They build you, then break you, because breaking you sells better. But Malik couldn't hear logic anymore. His body still shook with the residue of fear. The human nervous system, once triggered, doesn't calm easily. Adrenaline floods, cortisol spikes, breathing grows shallow. The body thinks it's under attack, and maybe it is. Only this time, not by fists or hunger, but by lenses and lies. By the time they reached Drayton's building, a private suite high above the city, Malik's hands were trembling so badly he could barely open the door. The billionaire led him into a vast room lined with glass and silence. From here, the city looked small, its noise distant, its cruelty abstract. Sit, Drayton said. You need food. A chef brought in a tray, soup, bread, fruit. Malik stared at it like it was foreign. He ate slowly, mechanically, while Drayton spoke on the phone across the room, voice sharp with restrained fury. No, I don't care about optics, he snapped. He's a child, not a headline. Pull every unauthorized image or I'll sue the entire network. When he hung up, his face softened again. They won't stop, Malik, not until you tell your story yourself. Silence is fuel for them. Malik swallowed hard. What if I mess it up? What if they twist it again? They will, Drayton said. That's inevitable. But truth has weight. It takes time, yet it doesn't vanish. You speak, you control the frame. Malik stared at the skyline. But I don't know who I am. The admission came out small, frightened. Drayton didn't answer immediately. He walked to the window, looking out over the gray sprawl. Neither did I, he said quietly. Not for a long time. He told Malik what no one knew, that he had once lived in the same kind of shelter, that hunger had been his first teacher, that his empire had been built not on genius, but on escape. I built walls made of money, he said, voice low. But walls don't feed the soul. You reminded me what real wealth looks like, giving when you have nothing left. Malik listened, unsure how to carry that kind of praise. That night, he slept in a guest room softer than any bed he'd known. But comfort didn't bring rest. Dreams came, fragments of his mother's face, the echo of the diner bell, the old woman's tearful gratitude. Then the crowd again, shouting, accusing, the noise swelling until it became unbearable. He woke with a gasp, soaked in sweat. The clock read 3:17 a.m. He crept out onto the balcony. The city lights blinked below like distant fires. Somewhere down there, people were still arguing about him, dissecting his life as if it were fiction. For the first time, anger cut through the fog of fear. They'd taken his story, twisted it, and sold it back to the world as entertainment. He whispered to the night, I won't let them have me. The next morning, he told Drayton he wanted to speak publicly, but on his own terms. No press conference, no media circus, just a single live broadcast where he could tell the truth directly. Drayton hesitated. They'll come for you harder after that. I know, Malik said, but at least they'll hear it from me first. Drayton nodded slowly. Then we do it right. My team will arrange a feed, no editing, no spin. Word spread fast. Within hours, news outlets announced that the viral boy would break his silence live that evening. Commentators speculated endlessly. Redemption arc, confession, exposure. Ratings soared before a single word was spoken. When the time came, Malik sat in front of a simple camera in Drayton's office. No script, no makeup, just him. A boy with tired eyes and a voice still finding its strength. He began quietly. I didn't mean to become a story, he said. I was just hungry. I saw people hungrier in a different way, and I wanted to share what little I had. That's all. He paused, fingers gripping his knees. People say I don't exist. Maybe they're right, not on paper, but I'm here. I breathe, I feel, I hurt, I care. Isn't that what makes someone real? Somewhere across the city, people watching fell silent. He went on, his voice trembling but clear. You can write laws about names and numbers, but kindness doesn't need a signature. It's proof of life all by itself. When the feed ended, there was no applause, no music. Just a boy exhaling, shoulders shaking, as Drayton placed a steady hand on his back. The world's response was instant. half awe, half outrage. Some called it the most powerful speech in years. Others accused him of manipulation. But among the noise, something new began to stir. People sharing their own stories of being unseen, unheard, undocumented in ways that had nothing to do with papers. For the first time, Malik's story wasn't just his. It was a mirror. Drayton saw the tide turning and made a decision that would risk everything he'd built. He called his board, his investors, his lawyers. If they want to question the worth of a boy's humanity, he said, let's put our own humanity on trial. The next morning, the world woke to headlines that made even the cynics pause. Billionaire donates entire year's profits to fund scholarships for homeless and undocumented youth. In one gesture, Drayton had shifted the narrative, but the backlash was immediate. Stocks dropped, investors threatened lawsuits, politicians denounced him. The same machine that devoured Malik now turned on him, hungrier still. Drayton didn't care. Let them, he said. Maybe the world needs to starve a little before it remembers what it means to be fed. For Malik, the gesture was more than charity. It was protection. Someone with power had finally chosen to stand beside him, not above him. But the war wasn't over. The institutions that thrived on control had been challenged, and when systems feel threatened, they strike back. The next move would not be merciful. The storm that followed was quieter than the headlines made it seem. It didn't roar, it crept. First came the editorials, polite but poisonous. Generosity is admirable, they said, but society cannot reward lawlessness. Then the talk shows, guests arguing over Malik's message, reducing his life to a segment between commercials. Drayton's foundation meetings turned hostile. Board members spoke in the careful tones of men who feared loss more than injustice. Sam, you've made a spectacle of philanthropy, one said. You've turned charity into rebellion. Drayton only replied, maybe it needed to be one. Outside those glass walls, Malik's face appeared on murals, posters, handmade cardboard signs. Strangers painted him not as victim or saint, but as mirror, the child who gave without calculation. And somehow, wherever those faces appeared, small kindnesses followed. Cafes feeding the homeless for free, students raising tuition funds for strangers, neighbors repairing each other's houses. People began calling it the plate movement. Malik stayed hidden in the apartment above Drayton's office, watching from the window as the world argued about him. He didn't understand why people kept acting like he was extraordinary. I just gave food, he said one night. Drayton answered, and that's the rarest thing of all, giving without audience. The moment was pure. The world saw purity and panicked. Malik smiled faintly, but inside he felt the pull of doubt. The more others spoke for him, the less he felt real. The next morning, the city announced a formal inquiry into Drayton's foundation and the validity of charitable disbursements. The word fraud hung between news anchors like a threat. Drayton read the notice, jaw set. They're not after me, he said. They're after the idea that compassion can break their rules. He went to every hearing himself. Reporters described him standing beside Malik, refusing to let the boy be separated or silenced. Cameras caught their silhouettes, the billionaire and the orphan, facing a row of officials in dark suits. When Malik spoke, his voice trembled at first, then steadied. If the law says I can't study, can't build, can't help others because of paper I never had, then maybe the law is hungry too. The room went silent. The chairman cleared his throat, unable to meet the boy's eyes. Afterward, something uncanny began to happen. Whenever Malik entered a space, a courtroom, a street, a crowded hall, arguments seemed to lose their edge. People spoke slower, listened longer. A clerk who had come to deliver a citation ended up handing over her own lunch to a beggar outside the courthouse. A news anchor scheduled to attack Malik in a live debate froze on air, then confessed she couldn't stop thinking about her own estranged son. Coincidence, perhaps. But too many coincidences create a pattern. Drayton noticed it first. You calm rooms, he said quietly. It's not charisma. It's something deeper. Like you remind people of their better selves. Malik shook his head. Maybe they just feel guilty. Guilt fades, Drayton said. This doesn't. By the end of the week, the investigation backfired. Public sympathy surged. Donations poured in, not just to Drayton's fund, but to shelters nationwide. Even the city officials who had once threatened Malik now requested photo ops, eager to be seen beside him. The machine that had devoured him was trying to taste redemption. But beneath the sudden praise, Malik sensed another danger: adoration that hollowed truth. People began selling t-shirts with his face. Corporations used his story in advertisements about kindness. The very system he had exposed was dressing itself in his image. He sat alone one night, staring at one of those commercials on television, a fast food chain promising to donate a meal for every meal. The jingle played over footage of him handing over the plate. He felt sick. Drayton found him there, remote still in his hand. "They've taken it again," Malik whispered. "Turned it into profit." Drayton turned off the screen. "Then we take it back." "How?" "By showing them the cost." He began planning a public event, not a gala or broadcast, but something raw and impossible to spin. A dinner open to everyone the city ignored: the homeless, the jobless, the forgotten. Malik would serve the first plate himself. No sponsors, no press exclusives, just truth in motion. Word leaked, of course. Cameras would come. But Drayton didn't care. "Let them watch," he said. "Let them see what humility looks like when it feeds itself." On the night of the event, a cold drizzle fell over the city. Volunteers set up long tables under the old railway bridge, candles flickering inside jars. People arrived slowly at first, then in waves, hundreds of them, drawn by rumor more than invitation. Malik stood behind a steaming pot of stew, ladle in hand. When the first man approached, an old veteran with trembling fingers, Malik filled the bowl and smiled. "Eat well," he said. The man's eyes filled. "No one said that to me in years." As the line moved, something extraordinary unfolded. The drizzle eased, the air warming as if from within. People began sharing, passing plates, helping one another. Strangers hugged. A child offered half her bread to a woman twice her age. A reporter covering the scene lowered her camera and began serving beside Malik. Later, someone would swear that for a moment the candlelight around the boy flared brighter than the others, though no one could explain why. Maybe the wax caught the wind, maybe faith caught the heart, but everyone there remembered the feeling, a sudden stillness, like being forgiven. When the night ended, Drayton stood watching the tables empty, rain turning the streets to mirrors. "You see," he said softly, "this is your power, not magic, just truth strong enough to bend the world a little." Malik looked at the reflection of the candles floating in the puddles. "Truth shouldn't need a witness," he murmured. "Maybe not," Drayton said, "but tonight it got one." Above them, the city lights shimmered as if the stars had descended to street level. For the first time in weeks, Malik felt calm, not because the world had changed, but because he had. He understood now that his existence itself was an act of defiance, proof that compassion could outlive its own destruction. And somewhere in the distance, unseen by both of them, the gears of power began to turn again. Slower this time, wary, as if unsure whether the boy they'd tried to erase had somehow rewritten the rules. Morning struck the city like a drumbeat of headlines. The plate movement goes global. Markets react to philanthropists' stand. Drone footage showed endless tables snaking through city blocks, volunteers serving meals in Malik's name. The movement had grown faster than anyone could trace. What had started under one bridge now burned across continents. Inside Drayton's glass tower, the atmosphere felt different, quieter, colder. Every screen showed smiling anchors talking about compassion, while tickers below reported his company's falling stock. Investors were nervous, board members were circling. Drayton walked through the lobby and felt the temperature drop as conversations stopped mid-sentence. On the 22nd floor, the conference room was already packed. Suits waited like judges. At the head of the table sat Avery Cole, Chief Financial Officer, lean, polite, and dangerous. "Sam," Avery began, smiling too easily, "we all respect what you've done for the boy, but philanthropy has turned into politics. The foundation's spending has tripled. We need control before regulators step in." Drayton didn't sit. "Control isn't what we owe. Responsibility is." Avery slid a folder across the table. "Sign this. We'll spin off the foundation as independent. You can keep your halo. The company keeps its distance." Drayton glanced at the document and said nothing. The silence stretched until Avery's smile twitched. "I won't sign," Drayton said finally. "If you want me out, call for a vote." "You're forcing our hand," Avery said. "No," Drayton replied. "You're forcing your conscience." He left the room. Cameras followed him down the corridor. Reporters waiting outside the building, hungry for fracture. That night, the footage aired everywhere. The philanthropist walking alone, face unreadable, empire trembling. While the board plotted, the streets shifted. Malik's dinners had become nightly rituals. Wherever he went, crowds followed, not to worship, but to work. People cooked, cleaned, carried. The hungry ate, the lonely spoke. A local mayor tried to claim credit by visiting with press in tow. Malik greeted him with a smile and handed him a ladle. "Help serve," he said. Cameras caught the moment, the mayor hesitating, then obeying. The image spread faster than any speech. Reporters noticed that wherever Malik appeared, power seemed to soften. Even rival gangs in one neighborhood called a week-long truce to join the meal lines. "We just wanted to see if it's real," one said to the camera. It was. But not everyone welcomed the calm. Advertising firms complained that compassion didn't sell well. Media outlets that once profited from outrage found their numbers slipping. A producer in one network meeting shouted, "We need to make him polarizing again. Fast." By morning, new narratives emerged. Accusations of hidden funding, speculation about Drayton's motives, whispers that the movement was a recruitment front. The noise grew louder, and through it, Malik kept working, serving, cleaning, smiling. Yet fatigue etched his face. Sleepless nights hollowed his eyes. The city that once ignored him now demanded his presence everywhere. Drayton saw it happening and felt the trap closing. He called Malik to his office. "You can't keep letting them own your time," he said. "You're not a symbol. You're a person." Malik looked at him with calm beyond his years. Maybe a person is what the symbol needs to remember. Before Drayton could answer, his phone buzzed. A message from Avery. Emergency board vote scheduled tomorrow, 9 a.m. The next day, sunlight hit the tower's mirrored sides like a blade. Inside, cameras weren't allowed, but someone leaked audio anyway. Avery's voice echoed through the room. "Effective immediately. Samuel Drayton is relieved as CEO pending review." No protests, no drama. Just the crisp sound of paperwork. Drayton signed his resignation line himself, refusing to give them a spectacle. When he stepped outside, Malik was waiting on the steps. Crowds had already gathered, news vans humming. Drayton looked at him, almost apologetic. "They took the company." Malik shook his head. "They only took a building." Drayton laughed once quietly. "You always sound older than me." That evening, as the city absorbed the shock, another coincidence unfolded. Power went out across 3 districts, a blackout. The only light visible from above came from the bridge where the plate movement had begun. Hundreds of candles flickered in unison. A helicopter camera caught it. The boy and the billionaire standing side by side, silhouettes framed by candlelight. The feed spread in seconds, millions watching. No speeches, no slogans, just 2 figures among the people, handing out bowls in the dark. For a few minutes, the city forgot its screens and simply looked. Later, analysts would call it the turning point. The night commerce blinked, and humanity saw its own reflection again. In the boardrooms, Avery watched the live feed in silence. Behind him, younger executives shifted uncomfortably. One said, "It's beautiful." Avery turned, voice flat. "It's dangerous." Because he understood something most didn't. Movements built on sincerity couldn't be bought, and that made them unpredictable. He began drafting a strategy to reclaim the narrative. Investigations, leaks, alliances with media giants. He would turn faith into fatigue, hope into controversy. Outside his window, the blackout ended. Lights returned to the city. But they looked different now, softer somehow, as if reluctant to compete with what had just glowed without electricity. Drayton, now technically unemployed, smiled as he watched from the bridge. "They can keep the stock tickers," he said. "We'll keep the light." Malik didn't answer. He was watching a small child across the table line, sharing half a roll of bread with an old man. For a moment, time folded. The same gesture he'd made months ago in that diner. And just like that, the loop closed. Not with wealth, but with witness. The movement had started with hunger and was now feeding something far more complicated. a city's rediscovered appetite for decency. Above them, night thickened. Somewhere in the towers, new plots formed, but for the first time, those schemes felt small. By the next week, every billboard glowed with a message that wasn't Malik's. Charity or fraud? Who profits from the plate? Even the buses carried the question like graffiti sanctioned by the powerful. Avery Cole had built the perfect weapon: doubt. He didn't need to disprove Malik or Drayton. He just had to make people tired of believing. At dawn, broadcast trucks idled outside shelters. Reporters shouted over one another about missing donations, irregularities, foreign interference. The words sounded serious. The evidence didn't exist. But repetition breeds truth faster than facts. Inside a small cafe near the bridge, Malik watched the screen with volunteers. The barista muted the volume, embarrassed. "They'll move on soon," she said. Malik smiled faintly. "They never move on. They just run out of breath." He stepped outside, wind slicing through his jacket. Across the street, a crowd had gathered, half protesters, half supporters. The chants overlapped until no one could tell anger from defense. Drayton's car pulled up beside him. "Get in," he said. They drove in. Silence through streets painted with slogans. Truth costs money, feed your own first, plate, orange propaganda. Drayton said, "Avery's campaign has reach. He's buying journalists, influencers, half the council. They've opened a formal inquiry into the movement's funding." Malik turned from the window. "What funding? We barely have enough for bread." "Doesn't matter," Drayton said. "They'll invent a story if they need one." The car stopped outside the tower. Protesters lined the steps, shouting for refunds of donations they'd never given. Cameras caught Malik stepping out beside Drayton. Every gesture dissected, every glance uploaded. Inside, a friendly receptionist whispered, "They've frozen the accounts." Drayton didn't flinch. Of course they have. He rode the elevator to the top floor, Malik beside him. The digital display ticked upward, 12, 14, 16, as if counting down instead. At the boardroom doors, security blocked their way. Avery was already inside, conducting a press conference. Through the glass wall they could see lights, microphones, his immaculate composure. "Ladies and gentlemen," Avery said, voice smooth as steel, "we regret to inform you that former executives misappropriated charitable funds. We will cooperate fully with investigators to ensure accountability." Drayton pushed through the doors before anyone could stop him. "You have no evidence," he said. Avery didn't miss a beat. "Samuel, always dramatic. The auditors disagree." Reporters swarmed, flashes strobed. Malik stood still behind Drayton, a single calm shape amid chaos. A journalist pointed a microphone toward him. "Do you deny taking money meant for the poor?" Malik met her eyes. "Every coin we touched fed someone, maybe not their stomach, maybe their heart. You can check either one." The room went still for a breath too long. Then Avery clapped once. "Lovely rhetoric," he said. "But we deal in ledgers here." Drayton stepped closer. "And I deal in people." Security escorted them out. That footage aired all evening, looped, edited, twisted. Talk show hosts mocked Drayton's meltdown. Hashtags trended. If fake kindness, is boy con. But in the streets something else spread. Neighbors who had eaten at the bridge dinners refused to believe the new narrative. They started their own streams, live videos showing kitchens, serving lines, receipts. "We are the audit," one woman said into her phone. "We saw the food." Within days, thousands of ordinary citizens flooded social media with evidence of their own kindness. Each meal, each act, a quiet rebuttal. Avery's PR firm scrambled. "The counter-narrative's out of control," one aide warned. "We can't fight this many witnesses." Avery frowned. "Then we don't fight. We dilute." He released new statements praising Malik while discrediting Drayton. "The boy's innocence was exploited," the headlines read. The billionaire used him for sympathy. It worked. Comment sections turned on Drayton. Anonymous accounts called him manipulative, corrupt, dangerous. Malik confronted him in the apartment that night. "They're dividing us." Drayton nodded. "Classic play. Find the light and split it until it looks like shadow." He poured tea into chipped mugs. "Let them. The story isn't ours anymore. It's everyone's." Outside, thunder rolled. Rain blurred the city lights. Malik watched water trickle down the glass like veins. If they take you down, who protects the others? Drayton smiled tiredly. Maybe they don't need protection anymore. The next morning, police arrived at his office with warrants. Cameras followed again. Avery's signature move. But when officers asked Drayton to surrender his records, he handed over everything willingly. "Transparency's easier when you've told the truth," he said. That line became another headline, but this one Avery hadn't written. By nightfall, protests had shifted. People no longer shouted fraud. They shouted, "Show us the truth." Everywhere Malik went, that phrase followed like a chant. He visited the diner where it had all begun. The same waitress was there, older, wary. She recognized him, then smiled. "Guess the world finally caught up to your manners." He laughed softly. "Still serving?" "Always," she said, "even when no one's watching." She handed him a plate on the house. "You eat this time." Outside, someone filmed the exchange through the window. The clip went viral overnight. Not staged, not scripted. Just a tired boy, a kind woman, a plate of food. Analysts called it the moment the smear campaign cracked. The narrative Avery had spent millions building collapsed under the weight of simplicity. In the boardroom, he watched the numbers fall. Viewership, influence, stock. A junior executive entered, nervous. "Sir, they're calling this the quiet revolution. People are switching off their screens." Avery turned toward the window, the city below dimmer than ever. "Then maybe we should too," he said, but his voice carried no conviction. Because deep down, he felt it. The same quiet that had followed Malik since that first night in the diner. The stillness that disarmed noise. In 1 week, Malik hadn't argued, hadn't fought, hadn't run. He had simply endured, and the city had begun to echo his patience. Drayton watched from his balcony as people lit candles again across the bridge. "They tried to starve the truth," he murmured, "but hunger has a good memory." Malik stood beside him, hands deep in his pockets, eyes reflecting the small fires below. The city looked bruised but breathing, like something coming back to life. Somewhere far beneath the noise, Avery's empire still moved. Lawsuits, politics, propaganda. But its rhythm faltered. Too many people had tasted a different kind of power, one that didn't require permission. And that, more than any scandal or speech, was what truly frightened them. Morning cracked open the city like a bell. By 8 a.m., the plaza outside City Hall was already a mosaic of faces. Students, merchants, nurses still in scrubs. The banners were quieter now, fewer slogans, more questions. Inside, the main chamber had been rearranged for the hearing. Long wooden tables, microphones, rows of officials. Cameras floated like insects above the crowd. The topic on the docket read simply, "Public Inquiry, the Plate Movement." Drayton sat at one end, sleeves rolled, eyes steady. Malik sat beside him, smaller than the room, but somehow the gravity of it. Across the table, Avery Cole waited, immaculate as ever, his folders aligned with surgical precision. The chairwoman adjusted her glasses. "We're not here to assign guilt," she began, "but to understand the impact this movement has had on our city's order." That word, order, hung like dust. Avery spoke first, voice measured. "We've seen admirable intentions," he said, "but also chaos, unauthorized gatherings, economic disruption, lost revenue. Compassion without structure is a kind of anarchy." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Drayton leaned forward. "And structure without compassion is a machine that forgets who it's built for." The chairwoman lifted a hand. "Mr. Drayton, you'll have your turn." She turned to Malik. "You began this. What do you say to claims that you've encouraged lawlessness?" Malik looked up slowly. "Ma'am, I never asked anyone to follow me. I just gave my food away. Maybe that reminded people they could do the same." He paused. "If kindness spreads like disorder, maybe the city was starving longer than it knew." A few people in the gallery clapped before the gavel struck for silence. Outside, rain began to fall, light at first, then steady. Across town, the day kept moving. In a small precinct, Officer Ray Delgado watched the hearing on a wall-mounted screen. He'd arrested pickpockets, protesters, sometimes people just hungry enough to steal a sandwich. He switched off the sound and stared at his lunch, untouched. Then he packed it into a paper bag, walked outside, and handed it to the first man sleeping under the overpass. No speech, no cameras. Just one gesture. At the local newsroom, reporter Lena Cho sat with an unfinished article titled "The Myth of the Viral Samaritan." She highlighted the word myth, deleted it, and replaced it with mirror. Then she hit send. In the marketplace, the diner waitress who'd first met Malik stood by her counter, counting coins. A teenager came in, dripping wet, asking for coffee he couldn't pay for. She poured it anyway. Small acts, uncoordinated, rippling outward while City Hall debated legality. Back inside, the hearing dragged past noon. Avery presented graphs, projections, warnings. If this continues unchecked, he said, we risk destabilizing food service industries, overburdening welfare programs. Drayton interrupted. We risk remembering what those programs were for. The chairwoman sighed. Please, gentlemen. But the room had shifted. Reporters leaned closer, sensing the current changing direction. Avery's calm began to crack. You think sentiment can replace systems? Malik spoke softly. No, but systems without sentiment collapse anyway. You can't legislate hunger away, you can only feed it. The chairwoman whispered something to her aide, then addressed the room. We've heard enough for today. A murmur of protest rose. She continued. Before we adjourn, I'd like to note this council has received over 30,000 letters from citizens reporting acts of unpaid service inspired by this movement. Not one request for compensation. Even Avery blinked. The hearing closed with no verdict, only the echo of applause that defied protocol. That evening, as twilight bled through the skyline, Malik and Drayton walked through the plaza. Reporters shouted questions, but the boy stopped at the fountain's edge instead. Coins glittered under the water, donations from strangers who still believed in wishes. He looked at Drayton. Do you think anything changed? Drayton tilted his head toward the city streets where candlelight was beginning to appear again. Balconies, shop windows, the bridge in the distance. Listen, he said. From somewhere unseen came the sound of laughter, the rhythm of pots and ladles, the hum of a city cooking together. Change doesn't sound like thunder, Drayton said. It sounds like this. Malik closed his eyes. The rain had stopped. The air smelled of bread. For a heartbeat, he thought he could feel the pulse of every small kindness, each one a spark feeding the next. He opened his eyes, then let it keep sounding. Drayton smiled. It will. The camera would have pulled back then, rising over the plaza, two figures at a fountain, surrounded by people beginning, quietly, to believe again. By dawn, the city had begun to hum differently, not louder, not busier, simply more awake. Posters once calling for order and accountability now carried handwritten words in the margins. Feed first, talk later. The news cycle spun itself thin overnight. Avery Cole's firm, Cole Strategies, released a polished statement declaring victory. The council will review the plate movement to ensure social stability. But the footage told another story. Malik's calm voice, the audience applause, the chairwoman's acknowledgement. By mid-morning, the clip had already been recut, remixed, and replayed across thousands of feeds. Compassion without structure is anarchy, Avery had said. You can't legislate hunger away, Malik had answered. Two sentences became the day's moral equation. Avery stood in his glass office, staring at the skyline. The city looked clean, manageable. Ace Alb, on network of controllable assets. Yet his reflection in the window had never seemed more hollow. His assistant Mara entered quietly. Sir? The investors pulled 2 accounts this morning. He didn't turn. Which ones? Caldwell Foods and Metro Logistics. They said they're reevaluating their public image. Something about community responsibility. Avery exhaled slowly. Community, he repeated, the word tasting foreign. He straightened his tie, ignoring the tremor in his fingers. Get me the evening slot on Channel 7. I'll remind them who controls the narrative. Meanwhile, Malik was sitting on the steps of the same diner where it had all begun. The owner had kept the footage framed behind the counter, a small act of defiance. But today, Malik didn't look at it. He was helping a little girl balance her plate on the stairs. She offered him half her sandwich, grinning. He smiled back, but shook his head. You keep it. I already ate. It was true. The community kitchen down the block had refused to let him leave hungry anymore. A few reporters lingered nearby, but their questions softened over the days. They asked less about the movement and more about the people it had touched. A man from the local radio approached. "We're hosting a citywide cleanup this weekend," he said. "Your name keeps coming up. You gonna be there?" Malik nodded. "If there's work, I'll be there." The man smiled. "You always are." At sunset, Avery's broadcast began. He stood in front of a blue backdrop, composure restored, words rehearsed. "Good evening. Compassion is a virtue we all cherish, but our society runs on balance. When sentiment overrides order, everyone suffers." He spoke for 7 minutes straight, each syllable polished, every gesture measured. Yet the viewers saw something he didn't. The fatigue behind the poise, the flicker of desperation in his gaze. The live chat scrolled faster than any anchor could read. He still doesn't get it. Where was this energy when kids were starving? Talk less, help more. At minute 8, the feed cut unexpectedly. The station switched to live footage from downtown, volunteers distributing meals under a banner that read, "Plate by plate." The anchor apologized for technical difficulties. The interruption lasted only 60 seconds, but it was enough. When the broadcast returned, Avery's voice cracked mid-sentence. He saw it in his monitor, the crowd outside the studio, people watching from windows, holding plates instead of protest signs. And for the first time in years, Avery Cole lost his script. Drayton watched the chaos unfold from his apartment. He could almost feel the tension unspooling across the city. It wasn't revenge exactly, just the scales finding equilibrium. He turned to the boy sitting beside him. Malik was quiet, hands clasped, eyes half closed. Drayton said, "You didn't plan this, did you?" Malik shook his head. "You can't plan kindness. It happens, then it moves on." Drayton smiled faintly. "Still, it's turning the city upside down. Maybe it's just turning it right side up." The simplicity of the answer silenced him. Outside, the sound of rain began again, a soft, steady rhythm that felt like punctuation. By midnight, Avery's empire had begun to crumble. Emails leaked, consultants admitting they'd fabricated data, sponsors confessing staged testimonials. One executive released a statement calling Avery's manipulation an assault on empathy. The internet was merciless, but not cruel. The comments were less about revenge and more about exhaustion. People were tired of pretending indifference was strength. When reporters reached Avery's building the next morning, the office was empty. The plaque had been removed. Some said he'd left town. Others said he was seen at the same diner, ordering coffee and leaving a tip that covered 3 meals. No one could confirm it. The city began to shift in small, measurable ways. Cafes added community plates. Meals prepaid for anyone who couldn't afford one. Schools hosted shared breakfasts. Bus drivers left lunch bags on benches. The movement wasn't organized anymore. It didn't need to be. It had become muscle memory, a reflex of kindness woven into daily routine. Malik didn't appear in public often after that. He refused interviews, scholarships, even Drayton's offers of a bigger stage. "It's not my story anymore," he'd say. One night, he stood again at the fountain, watching coins glint beneath the surface. The air was cool, the city lights soft. A voice behind him said, "You know they're calling it a miracle." It was Drayton, holding 2 cups of coffee. Malik smiled. "Miracles are just things people notice too late." Drayton handed him a cup. "Then, what do we call what you did?" He took a sip before answering. "A beginning." The older man nodded. "And every beginning needs an ending." "Maybe not this one," Malik said. "Some stories just keep feeding themselves." They stood in silence as the fountain's water caught the light. Gold, then silver, then clear again. Morning light spilled across the same cracked pavement where Malik once stood counting coins. The sign above the diner still flickered, but now it did so against a different kind of city. One slower, kinder. The air smelled faintly of coffee and fresh bread instead of exhaust and loneliness. Inside, the tables were fuller than they used to be. A new chalkboard hung by the door. "Pay what you can." Beneath it, someone had drawn a small plate with a heart in the center. The rule needed no explanation. The old waitress, hair whiter now, smile softer, wiped a counter already clean. "Same seats open," she said as Malik walked in. "Back corner. You always liked the window." He laughed quietly. "Guess I did." He took the seat and looked outside, where a line had formed, not of the desperate but of the willing. People brought trays from home, pots of soup, wrapped sandwiches. Others arrived to eat. The exchange was wordless, balanced. On the radio, a familiar voice spoke. "This week marks 1 year since the first viral clip changed our city. Economists call it the compassion turn. Whatever the name, it started here, in a place no bigger than a bus stop." The waitress poured him coffee. "Funny, huh? All this started because one hungry kid couldn't keep his food to himself." Malik smiled. He wasn't thinking much that day, just didn't like seeing people hungry. She looked at him more closely, recognition flickering but unspoken. "Well," she said softly, "I'm glad he didn't." From the booth near the door, an elderly couple entered, familiar faces, older but unmistakable. They hesitated, scanning the room until their eyes landed on Malik. For a second, none of them spoke. Then the old woman smiled. "You look well, son." He nodded. "So do you." The man slid a small envelope across the table. "A letter came to the shelter for you. Didn't know where else to bring it." Malik opened it. Inside was a single sheet bearing the seal of a foundation, the Drayton Fellowship, continuing scholarships for acts of service. His name was listed first, not as a recipient, but as program advisor. He folded the letter carefully. "Guess he kept his promise," he murmured. The woman leaned in. "He said you'd say that." Outside, a small group of children pressed their faces to the window, watching him. One boy held a half-eaten sandwich, uncertain. Malik motioned him inside. The waitress brought an extra plate without asking. Soon, the table was full. Kids, laughter, crumbs everywhere. The old couple joined in, telling stories between bites. The diner's hum rose like music. Through the glass, the street shimmered with life. A vendor handing fruit to a stranger. A delivery driver sharing lunch with a clerk. A bus driver passing out apples from a paper bag. Each gesture small, unremarkable, yet together they looked like light moving through water. Malik glanced at the clock above the counter. The hands ticked forward, steady and certain. He took a breath that felt like closure and beginning all at once. When he finally stood to leave, the waitress tried to wave him down. "You forgot your change." He turned, smiling. "Keep it for the next plate." She watched him step outside into the sunlight, where the city waited, not fixed but alive, learning. The camera would have followed him only a few steps, far enough to see the movement ripple outward again. A stranger holding a door for another, a coin dropped in a cup, a loaf of bread shared across a table. Then the frame would widen, streets, rooftops, the diner's sign blinking steadily against the morning sky.